In what has become one of the most shocking stories to grip the nation, three esteemed educators from Brookridge College have tested positive for HIV, and the revelation is sending shockwaves through the small, tight-knit community. But what's raising even more eyebrows is the alleged connection between their diagnoses and a single student. This is not just a scandal. It's a calculated act of revenge. At first glance, Brookridge College appears to be an idyllic place of learning, a beacon of academic excellence. But beneath the manicured lawns and pristine lecture halls, dark secrets were festering, secrets that have now been violently unearthed. It all started with an anonymous tip, a chilling message sent to the local news station. Three teachers, one student, a virus. The cryptic message was only the beginning of what would unravel into a tale of betrayal, heartbreak, and vengeance. 17-year-old Kayla Johnson and her older sister Monique were inseparable, best friends, confidants. Monique, who had graduated from Brookridge just 2 years earlier, was well-known and well-loved, a star student and a charismatic presence on campus. But Monique's path to success came at a devastating cost. Monique's diary revealed chilling allegations against three of the college's most respected faculty members. The teachers, known for their charm and influence, had preyed on Monique, shattering her trust and leaving her emotionally devastated. But Monique never got the chance to tell her story. Tragically, Monique's life was cut short just months after her graduation. The official cause of death, complications from untreated HIV. But for Kayla, Monique's death was more than a tragedy. It was a call to action. Fueled by grief and rage, Kayla made a choice that would change everything. What happened next was a series of events so shocking that even seasoned investigators were left speechless. March 2019, Brookridge College, a thriving academic institution, was alive with the energy of students and faculty alike. But beneath the surface of this ordinary campus was a storm brewing, one that would consume Monique Johnson, a bright young woman with everything to live for. Monique was one of those students teachers couldn't help but notice. Smart, driven, and destined for greatness, she had unknowingly caught the attention of three influential figures at Brookridge. What began as mentorship and guidance quickly twisted into something far more sinister. Monique's once stellar academic journey became a nightmare as these trusted mentors turned predators. Her private journal, discovered only after her death, painted a harrowing picture of manipulation, coercion, and isolation. When whispers of the inappropriate relationships began to circulate, Monique's world crumbled. Instead of receiving support, she became the target of relentless rumors and ridicule. The teachers who had exploited her were untouchable, while she was branded a pariah. As weeks turned into months, the emotional toll became unbearable. Monique, once a vibrant and hopeful young woman, was now a shadow of her former self. Every day felt heavier than the last. Erica, Monique, you've been avoiding me. I'm worried about you. Please talk to me. Even those closest to Monique could sense her unraveling. But despite their best efforts, the walls she had built around her pain were unyielding. She carried her burden alone. On a cold December morning, Monique disappeared. Hours later, her lifeless body was discovered near the riverbank. She had left behind a note, a final heartbreaking message to those she loved. Her death certificate listed the cause as suicide. For her family, the grief was immeasurable. But for Kayla, Monique's older sister, the tragedy was more than just a loss. It was an unforgivable injustice. In the days following Monique's death, Kayla uncovered the full extent of her sister's torment. Page by page, the journal revealed the names of those responsible and the horrors they had inflicted. Kayla's sorrow began to transform into something else, a thirst for revenge. Erica, tearfully, she told me they wouldn't leave her alone. I didn't understand how bad it was. I should have done more. Fueled by guilt and rage, Kayla meticulously pieced together the events leading up to Monique's death. Each revelation added to her resolve. This wasn't just about justice. It was about retribution. Kayla knew she couldn't rely on the system to punish those who had destroyed her sister. She had to take matters into her own hands. Every detail was considered, every step calculated. By the time the new year arrived, Kayla's plan was in motion. What began as a grieving sister's quest for answers had transformed into a chilling plot of calculated revenge. The stage was set. What happened next would leave an entire community in shock and expose the darkness lurking behind Brookridge College's pristine facade. January 2020, Brookridge College reopened for the spring semester, unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows. Kayla Johnson, consumed by her grief and fury, had spent weeks crafting a meticulous plan to avenge her sister. The first step was infiltration. Kayla at a local coffee shop. She approaches Mr. Harper, who's grading papers at a corner table. She introduces herself as a part-time college student studying education and expresses admiration for his work. Kayla knew she couldn't confront the teachers directly. Instead, she would become a part of their lives, carefully gaining their trust while hiding her true intentions. It began with Mr. Harper. Kayla's approach was calculated. She studied every detail about her targets, from their hobbies to their daily routines. Every interaction was rehearsed, every word chosen to draw them in. But behind her polite smile, Kayla's emotions simmered. Sitting across from the man who had tormented her sister was almost unbearable, yet she knew she couldn't falter. As weeks turned into months, Kayla became a fixture in their lives. She played the role of the eager student, the helpful neighbor, the friendly acquaintance, but each interaction came at a cost. Every step forward was a reminder of Monique's pain. The weight of her mission threatened to crush her, but Kayla's grief had transformed into an obsession. She couldn't stop now. Her surveillance grew more intense. Kayla documented their every move, from the mundane to the incriminating. She was no longer just planning, she was hunting. The deeper she dove into her plan, the darker her thoughts became. Kayla's meticulous nature left nothing to chance. She was determined to make them suffer as Monique had. Moments of hesitation crept in. Was this the right path? Could she really go through with it? But every doubt was silenced by the memory of Monique's tear-streaked face. Kayla's plan required precision. A single mistake could unravel everything. But the closer she got to her targets, the more the lines between justice and vengeance blurred. Her methods were as insidious as the pain they had inflicted on Monique. Each act was a calculated strike, designed to leave no trace. But as her plan unfolded, the weight of her actions began to take its toll. Kayla was no longer just avenging her sister. She was becoming consumed by the darkness she sought to fight. Kayla, this isn't what Monique would have wanted. You're destroying yourself. Kayla tearfully. They destroyed her, Erica. She's gone because of them. Someone has to make them pay. Kayla's single-minded pursuit of revenge came at a cost. The girl who had once been Monique's protector was now teetering on the edge of self-destruction. The first domino had fallen. Kayla's plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. But as the consequences of her actions began to unfold, she would soon realize that revenge comes at a price. February 2020. The lives of Brookridge's respected educators began to spiral out of control. What seemed like small, unrelated misfortunes soon revealed themselves as a sinister pattern, unraveling the facades they had carefully maintained. For Mr. Harper, the first sign of trouble came in the form of an anonymous photograph. The memory he had long buried resurfaced in sharp focus, bringing with it a wave of guilt and dread. Mrs. Whitman, snapping, "I said I'll be out in a minute." Mrs. Whitman, once the picture of composure, found herself increasingly irritable and withdrawn. The unexplained illness gnawing at her body was matched only by the unease growing in her mind. For Mr. Andrews, the cracks in his confident demeanor were beginning to show. Once a charismatic leader among his peers, he now struggled to keep up appearances. As the weeks passed, paranoia took hold. Each teacher began to feel the weight of their secrets, unaware that their unraveling lives were part of a larger plan. Principal, before we wrap up, I'd like to remind everyone about the upcoming health screenings. Attendance is mandatory. The announcement of mandatory health screenings sent a ripple of anxiety through the group. Each of them feared what the results might reveal. Mrs. Whitman, I got a letter. Did you? Mr. Harper, defensive. I don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. Whitman, don't play dumb, Harper. Someone knows about what happened. Mrs. Whitman, what if they go to the principal or the police? Mr. Harper, keep your mouth shut. Panicking won't help anyone. The once collegial relationships between the teachers began to crumble. Fear and suspicion turned them against one another. Each of them faced their own personal hell. For Mr. Andrews, the evidence of his betrayal was undeniable. The walls were closing in. Mrs. Whitman's husband. What is going on with you? You've been acting strange for weeks. Mrs. Whitman, snapping. I'm fine, just drop it. At home, their personal lives were falling apart. Relationships strained under the weight of their growing paranoia and guilt. While the teachers spiraled, Kayla remained hidden in the shadows, watching as her plan unfolded. Every moment of their suffering was a step closer to justice for Monique. Mr. Andrews. This can't be a coincidence. Someone's targeting us. Mr. Harper. Who and why? No one knows anything. Mr. Andrews angrily. Are you sure about that? Because I'm not. As their paranoia grew, so did their mistrust of one another. The alliances they had formed to protect their secrets were crumbling under the weight of suspicion. You know what you did. You'll pay for it. The relentless torment left them on edge, their once stable lives unraveling thread by thread. And yet the true orchestrator of their downfall remained invisible. Kayla's plan was working, but as the teachers' lives fell apart, the question remained, how far would she go to ensure they paid for what they had done? March 12, 2020, 11:47 p.m. The office is bathed in a dim golden light from the desk lamp. The smell of stale coffee lingers in the air. The room feels suffocatingly small, its shelves packed with books and files, its walls adorned with plaques that now seem hollow and mocking. Kayla, dressed in black, stands motionless in the shadowed corner, her face illuminated just enough to reveal her hardened expression. She clutches a folded envelope tightly in her hand. Kayla had waited for this moment. It wasn't spur-of-the-moment rage. It wasn't a mistake. Every step leading here was deliberate, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold. The sound of footsteps grows louder in the hallway. The doorknob jiggles, and the door creaks open. Mr. Bradley enters, whistling faintly, carrying his leather briefcase. He's oblivious to Kayla's presence as he tosses the briefcase onto the desk and stretches, rubbing the back of his neck. He didn't notice her at first. He was too comfortable, too confident. Kayla watched him, trying to steady her shaking hands and her racing heart. Mr. Bradley flicks on the desk lamp and notices a photograph on the desk, a picture of Monique, smiling and carefree, taken years ago. His whistling stops abruptly. His face freezes, a flicker of unease crossing his features. What the hell? Kayla steps out of the shadows, her voice calm but chillingly cold. She trusted you. She thought you cared, and you destroyed her. Mr. Bradley spins around, startled, his eyes wide as he takes in Kayla's presence. Kayla, what are you doing here? You shouldn't. Don't you dare say my name. You don't get to pretend you care. Not after what you did to her. She throws the envelope onto the desk. Its contents, printed emails, photos, and notes spill out. Mr. Bradley glances at them, his face turning pale as realization sets in. Mr. Bradley stammering. I don't know what you think you know, but this isn't what it looks like. Kayla, snarling. It's exactly what it looks like. You manipulated her, used her, and then threw her away like she was nothing. You and those other monsters pushed her to the edge. You killed her. Mr. Bradley raises his hands defensively, stepping back as Kayla advances. His voice grows more desperate. Mr. Bradley. Listen, I made mistakes, okay? But that was years ago. I can explain. We can fix this. Just put that down and let's talk. Kayla picks up a heavy glass paperweight from the desk, a polished orb engraved with the school's emblem. She holds it tightly, her knuckles white. For a moment she hesitated. This was the man who had haunted her nightmares, the man who had destroyed her sister's life. But now, standing in front of him, he looked small, pathetic, weak. Mr. Bradley makes a sudden move toward the door, but Kayla blocks his path, slamming the door shut with her free hand. Kayla, voice trembling but resolute. You don't get to walk away from this. Not this time. Mr. Bradley lunges toward her, trying to wrestle the paperweight from her hands. The two struggle, knocking over books and papers in their chaotic movements. Kayla lets out a guttural scream, channeling every ounce of her pain and anger, and swings the paperweight. It connects with the side of his head with a sickening thud. Mr. Bradley collapses onto the floor, groaning in pain. Blood begins to seep from the wound, pooling on the hardwood floor. He tries to crawl away, but Kayla steps in front of him, blocking his path. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, but nothing about it felt satisfying. It wasn't justice. It was raw, unfiltered pain. Mr. Bradley. Please, please don't do this. I can help you. I can make it right. Kayla kneels beside him, tears streaming down her face. She grips the paperweight tightly, her hands trembling. Kayla, whispering. You can't make it right. She's gone. And just like that, it was over. The man who had stolen so much from her sister, from her family, was gone. But the emptiness he left behind remained. Junior officer. Sir, we've recovered an envelope. It's filled with, well, it's a lot. Emails, photos. Looks like blackmail material. Detective Hayes to himself. Monique Iverson. This just got a lot more complicated. Kayla knew this moment would come. She had planned for every possibility, except the overwhelming weight of her actions. Detective Hayes. Kayla Iverson, we'd like to ask you a few questions about last night. For Kayla, this was the beginning of the end. The pieces of her meticulously constructed plan were falling apart, and the truth was about to surface. Detective Hayes. Kayla, I need you to help me understand what happened. You were at the school last night, weren't you? Detective Hayes gently. I've read the letters. I've seen the photos. I know what they did to Monique. But this isn't the way, Kayla. Tell me what happened. Kayla. Monique was everything to me. After our dad left, she practically raised me. She was so bright, so full of life. And then they took that from her. Those teachers, they broke her. Kayla. I watched her disappear in front of me. And when she finally told me what happened, it was too late. They had already destroyed her. Kayla. She tried to fight back. She reported it, but no one believed her. They called her a liar, a troublemaker. The school turned its back on her, And then one day, she was gone. Kayla, I couldn't let them get away with it. They had to pay for what they did. Detective Hayes, so you decided to take matters into your own hands. Kayla, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure no one else would suffer like Monique did. As the investigation unfolded, the truth became clear. Kayla had orchestrated a calculated plan, targeting each teacher involved in Monique's exploitation. But her final confrontation with Mr. Bradley had spiraled out of control. The trial became a media sensation, sparking debates about justice, morality, and the limits of retribution. Kayla Iverson took the law into her own hands, leaving destruction in her wake. This was not justice. This was murder. Defense attorney, what Kayla did was wrong, but before you judge her, consider what drove her to this point. She was failed by the very systems meant to protect her and her sister. She's not a monster. She's a grieving sister who wanted to right a terrible wrong. Kayla's actions divided a community and sparked a national conversation. Was she a victim seeking justice or a criminal blinded by revenge? Kayla, to those who love Monique, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't save her. And to those who hurt her, I hope you live every day knowing what you did. This isn't the ending I wanted, but maybe now Monique can rest. What would you have done? This is Kayla's story, a story of love, loss, and the blurred lines between justice and revenge. Don't you think you need to subscribe at this point? I will see you soon again.